Let's talk about hex. I've been waiting to do this module uh, for so long just so that I could say those words. Welcome everybody to our presentation on the intriguing and complex history of hexes and curses within the diverse, multifaceted world of esotericism, magic, and witchcraft. Throughout our presentation tonight, we're going to explore the evolution of these practices across cultures and eras and societal contexts. And we're going to examine their motivations, their methods, and their interpretations, and then invite you to delve into the shadows of magic where potent words and unseen forces intertwine in the world of hexes. So while often used interchangeable, hexes and curses differ in their perceived intensity and in their purpose. A hex typically deals with everyday sort of mundane frustrations and targets minor setbacks in our lives to actually make things right. But curses were employed for more serious grievances, and curses were designed specifically to bring about justice, not just to restore what's right, but to bring justice. Both served as expressions of power and attempts to influence situations through supernatural means, and it was a matter of the intensity and the intention behind it on whether we're talking curse or hex. Now, we see the use of hexes and curses stretching back millennia, with traces found in the earliest civilizations from Mesopotamian clay tablets invoking divine wrath to Egyptian binding spells. These practices reveal a deep-seated human desire to seek protection, to seek retribution, and to influence the outcomes to restore a sense of justice or a sense of balance, a sense of right. So it's important to understand in the ancient world that the term witch would not have been used. I recognize that people interpret various documents, including the Christian Bible and the Jewish Bible, as having references to witches in it, but those are translations actually. See, in the ancient world, in Mesopotamia and Greek and Egyptian cultures, we find the idea uh, of magic, of esoteric practices, first mentioned, but in a sense of it being a poisoning or a healing. So if somebody was using herbal medicine and it healed people, they were known as a healer. If somebody used herbal medicine to remove a curse, they were known for removing curses. If somebody used herbal medicine to poison you, they were a poisoner. And so when we understand that and we look at things as far back as the Code of Hammurabi, which talks about whether the person who placed a hex on you did so with good reason or not. And if they did it with good reason, then you had no claim against that person, that esoteric practitioner, as it often gets interpreted or translated, against that witch. But if they did something against you that wasn't justified, then you had reason to have stake a claim against them, and that could result in their death. So it's really interesting to see that compared to what we see as we move forward. So as we move forward into the period of 15th century witchcraft, obsession, and the witch hunts and the Malleus Maleficarum, then we find that we're in a period of intense fear and persecution of people who were being called witches, who were not necessarily and very likely did not practice any type of esotericism as we know it today, but might have been midwives who pissed somebody off, maybe accidentally gave birth to a baby whose umbilical cord was wrapped around their neck, and they said that that person was a witch, and that's why the baby died. It was a pejorative term used to attack and discredit and often justify the killing of someone who maybe in many cases was a woman who threatened the power of the patriarchy, or somebody who was seen as being a threat in terms of having power to the clergy. And so they would be called witches. Now, beyond Europe, in the global perspective when we look at the global picture of curses and hexes, we encounter a wider tapestry of traditions where cursing and hexing feature prominently, but from a completely different perspective. From African voodoo to South American curandissimo, these practices reflect a diverse cultural understanding of magic, a worldview that is magical, a different perspective on power and the spiritual and psychic realms. And so it's critical for us to approach these traditions with respect and avoid imposing the Western idea of cursing and hexes and magic and witchcraft upon these traditions. And quite often we see that happen. I mean, there have been films in Hollywood, Serpent and the Rainbow, things like that, where we've interpreted the esoteric and magical practices of other cultures, very often the African diasporic traditions, and we interpret them through this Western lens of pejorative attacks on people from the 15th century, and as a result, we end up with people seeing the practices of the diasporic traditions as being quote unquote black magic. That's a racist trope, period. There's no question about it. For our people as an Afro-Sicilian, and for practitioners of Santeria, the Afro-Caribbean and South American traditions, we saw the world as magic. And so magic can be used to create or destroy. And it all depends on the intention. It all depends on what outcome we're looking to create. And so I really encourage everybody to, if you still use the terms black magic, white magic, stop, because it's racist. There is nothing about it that even remotely reflects how magic works. And so when we have a greater respect for the magical traditions beyond Europe, we begin to understand that it's not an issue of this way or that way. It's not opposite sides of a coin. It's a spectrum. And so, where does the magic spell become a hex? Where does it become a curse? We have to answer those questions, and that leads us to our next slide, where we understand our esotericism in an evolving landscape in the modern world. So, as I said, the esoteric practice, witchcraft, magic, presents a spectrum, or represents a spectrum of beliefs and practices, with many practitioners adhering to ethical guidelines and rejecting harmful magic. Other people from folk magic traditions understand that baneful work is part of the practice, and others still recognize that in doing our baneful work, we're doing the deepest shadow work possible, because we have to be able to draw on that shadow, and it helps us to integrate to become not just protected, but to reclaim our power. As a result of this, we see the practice of hexing and cursing in my tradition as being something that adds to our personal growth, because we're constantly challenged before we do the hex, before we do the spell for a curse. We're challenged to look at our intentions. Why are we doing this? Are we doing this for the purpose of restoring balance? Are we doing this for the purpose of justice, of retribution? Or are we doing this simply for the purpose of malintent? Are we being spiteful? Are we intentionally just wanting to harm somebody because we don't like them? So we have to ask ourselves these questions, and in asking ourselves these questions, it causes us to grow and to become a little bit more in control of our situation and be mindful of the fact that we always have that power. And so before things get to the point of needing to hex someone, if we're more mindful of our power, we can work in ways that prevent those things from happening. I think it's important that we understand that while the spell itself is about intent and belief and power dynamics, there's a psychological impact to cursing and hexing someone that we should recognize and that we should embrace, because the change that takes place in a hex or the change that takes place in a curse beyond the physical or magical effects, in the psychological realm, can allow us to release the tension, to release the trauma, to release the connection, the bondage that we have to that event, so that we then begin to heal. And that's another way of establishing balance, reestablishing balance and homeostasis in our lives. And so, the idea behind um, exploring power dynamics too is looking realistically, something that doesn't get talked about in modern esotericism, at the idea behind whether it's necessary for the person you're cursing to believe in a curse for it to work. Now, I can tell you it's absolutely not. I can tell you that esotericism doesn't require that we do any of those things. That the person has to be on board. It doesn't require that. It doesn't require that our intentions be right. It it just requires ethically that we have considered those things and considered what it is that we're doing. Now, if you're doing a curse or a hex on someone and it doesn't work, chances are pretty good either you weren't fully on board with it or a part of you knew that that wasn't the right approach to take, or it wasn't even an effective curse or hex if it required the other person to buy in, the other person to be afraid. So when I see people online talking about how, oh, I'm going to show them, I'm going to get even with them, you know, you'll never have seen me make a comment like that until after the hex or the curse is done. Once I know that it's already in motion, then I'll say to the person, we'll just see about that, or good luck with that. You don't have to threaten them because they don't have to be on board. And if they're warned, now you're having a battle of energy against energy. Whose will is stronger? So I don't let them know. And that brings us to our next slide, which is the ethical considerations and modern interpretations. So I think it's important for us as esoteric practitioners to explore respectful understanding of curses in different contexts and from different cultures, and to talk about the potential for harm, to talk about ethical responsibilities of using your power, both symbolically and esoterically, energetically, and ask yourself, it's I'm not here to place judgment, to make a moral judgment against anyone, but I do encourage everyone to ask themselves if the reason they're engaging a spell is to restore balance, or the reason they're engaging that spell is to get justice and retribution, or the reason they're engaging that spell is for spite and malice. And like I said, I'm not judging any of those reasons. They can all be valid for you. But you have to, the important thing is you have to be good with that. You have to have made the decision. If you're going to do something that's malicious, make the decision that you're okay with that. You don't want to do something that's malicious and then feel regret for it, or do something that's malicious and then say, God, I hope it doesn't come back on me, because you're drawing it right back on you. So as long as you're comfortable with the acts, the steps that you're taking, the acts that you're taking, then I can respect your practice. For me personally, I've never found it necessary to be malicious, because balance and the restoration of power, causing karma to ripen faster, is so much sweeter, and it doesn't require the kind of energy, the toll that it does in order to be malicious. And so, as a recap, I just want to encourage you to share in the comments below this module what your key takeaways were. But the key points I hope you take away is a little bit of a better understanding of the historic evolution, the cultural variations and considerations that we have, including ethical considerations, and the complexity of hexes and curses, and just that sort of the nuance surrounding the difference between them and the difference in your intentions. And I look forward to hearing your feedback on how you feel about hexes and curses. Is it something you would do in your practice or not? And I encourage you finally just to adopt a mindset. It doesn't judge those whose view on that is different from yours. It's sort of the one of the simplest ways that we begin to build bridges by allowing people to express their magic their way. So I hope this has been helpful for you guys, and I look forward to talking to you soon.